never tell when they were likely to strike. He would simply leave work, set off in his car, and hope to get home sooner rather than later. There seemed to be no rhyme nor reason as to when they'd occur. He'd just find himself halfway down some country lane, caught in rush-hour traffic on a mysterious ring road, or, as on one occasion, parked up in somebody else's drive in a completely unknown town, much to the consternation of the middle-aged woman who'd stood staring at George from her kitchen window, holding up a rolling pin to demonstrate that she was armed and not scared to use it. On average, it happened once or twice a month, and each time George found himself slightly further from home. Once he'd driven for 47 minutes in the wrong direction before suddenly realizing where he was. It had taken him a full hour and a half to navigate his way back, meaning it finally took nearly 3 hours just to get home from work. He was so tired when he eventually got through the front door that he just had a cheese sandwich for dinner and went to bed, which turned out to be a bad idea because the cheese gave him a rather disturbing dream about drowning in strawberry yogurt. And so George drove on, thinking about his day and getting further and further from home. On this particular day, George had filed away files, answered phones, written reports, updated his spreadsheets, and tried to muster up some enthusiasm for the data he was supposed to be analyzing, and when that failed, he just analyzed the data anyway. George had read 102 emails that he didn't want to read and replied to 37 emails he didn't really want to reply to. He'd purposely left the replies slightly longer than he should have, partly so that he'd look busier than he really was, and partly because he knew that the person expecting the reply would be getting irate and frustrated at his tardiness. He had checked the clock 137 times, and each time had been mildly disappointed that it was earlier than he had hoped it to be. George had thought about quitting his job and going off to write a novel. He had then decided that he'd probably just get bored doing that as well. He'd had sexual thoughts about Paula Treadcott from accounts. He had then spent a painfully embarrassing 4 minutes and 32 seconds clamped in behind his desk, silently willing an unwanted erection, protruding very obviously in his trousers, to please, for the love of God, go away before anybody sees. George had secretively surfed the internet looking for answers to the crossword he couldn't quite finish. He had then gone for a pointless 5-minute walk around the building in order to stretch his legs and to waste 5 minutes of the day. He had drifted off into a daydream whilst waiting for the automatic drinks machine to dispense his cup of watery coffee, briefly imagining how he would react should a giant lizard have broken in through the wall and started gobbling people up at random. He imagined himself flying into action, ripping off his shirt, tying his tie Rambo style around his head, and leaping at the beast with nothing to protect him but a shatterproof ruler and a hole punch. A modern-day superhero, sure to have the women swooning at his heroism. He then decided that in reality he would probably not have been heroic at all and likely would have merely run away and hidden under a table. His watery coffee had come out in the surprising form of weak tomato soup. He contemplated drinking it anyway, then thought better of it, and left it on the side in case someone else fancied it. He returned 2 minutes later and placed a post-it note next to the cup. It said, "Free tomato soup. It was supposed to be coffee. I did not spit in it." George had sat in front of his computer, getting irate and frustrated at the length of time it took some people to reply to his emails. George had spoken to Linda, the Business Services Administration Manager, and also his boss's boss's boss, or rather, Linda had spoken at him about the annual company barbecue he hated going to each year, but had to attend as it was a mandatory team-building exercise. She had explained that she was far too busy to organize the event this year, so she was delegating the task to him, which would have to be done in his spare time to prevent him from falling behind with his daily reports. Apparently George's team leader Anton had volunteered him for the task, knowing that he would be unable to say no and hoping it might reflect well on him in retrospect. George had drunk 7 cups of coffee, having figured out that to achieve coffee from